you know, probably for about 4 years to try and solidify the ORV park that's going to go in next to Mount Holly there, and those 2 old gravel pits which previously had been attempts to try and do landfill activities out here. And I'm really happy to say that with the help of the economic development people, I know Dan, you're in here, I saw you somewhere, I'm sorry, there you are, his folks in economic development at the county and the folks at the Oakland County Parks Department have been working with us hand in hand, and we're really excited about trying to bring this recreational venue to life here in the township. And one of the things they asked us if we would do is help join in bringing Dan Marriott here, who's a guest speaker from Washington, D.C. And if I understand it correctly, and he told me when I said this at our earlier meeting that I had it right, that he's basically been involved in helping other communities bring, if you will, a sense of place to their community. And this whole concept that we've talked about for the last 4 years of making the Dixie Corridor, hopefully from Springfield up to Holly where it gets back on I-75, the Dixie Byway and promote some of the recreational venues out here has been a goal of ours. So what we did is we're asking him to help come and explain to us today, how do we help bring that kind of a vision forward? For some of you, you may have been to our original master plan kickoff, which was about I think about 5 or so weeks ago at the Butzel Conference Center where we started our master plan. We have deliberately delayed the master plan revisions so that we could incorporate all of this activity together. It is our intention that when we're done with this process, to put the tools in place to help make the vision that the community comes together on for this area a reality. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. That's a good broad spectrum of it, and if I can, Dan, I'd like to turn it over to you. All right. Me first? Okay. Great. Thanks.
My name is John Bryant. I'm the program coordinator for Main Street Oakland County through the planning office. And it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Dan Marriott. It's all connected, and we're connected. I met Dan actually 22 years ago in Illinois when he was working on the Great River Road as a heritage corridor, which is the Mississippi River running the length of Illinois. And when he came to Oakland County and was hearing about the interest in the work looking at the Dixie Highway, just felt like it was a natural to potentially reach out to Dan and ask him to come take a look and talk to all of us about the potential of heritage corridors, of heritage roads. So a little bit of background here is the Saginaw Trail is an extension of Woodward Avenue. Woodward Avenue, Saginaw Trail, one the same, and then the Dixie Highway proceeding on up there through Green. So a long, long way, all the way through the county from beginning to end. So that's the Dixie Highway overall. And then last year, our Heritage Conference focus for Oakland County was the focus of the Dixie Highway, and also the idea of heritage roads, heritage corridors. So that was a little bit of background too. We started to wade into this conversation a little bit more. So corridors have all kinds of assets about them. It can be heritage locations, it can be natural features, it can be recreational amenities, it can be particular businesses. All kinds of features go together. It's not independent, just one thing that makes up a unique heritage road or heritage corridor. It's all those things kind of working together, both historic and new opportunities, to create this really dynamic sense of place, like Bob was talking about. And unfortunately, in many cases, we get one chance to get our flag. Because more and more people are looking for these unique places, these unique identities. And we have a wealth of opportunity right here in the area around the Dixie Highway here in Groveland Township, Holly Township, and around. So we have the natural features, the future of the ORV park with the recreational opportunities more connecting. And with the two townships, for our purposes, even though the corridor is much longer going through all the county, for our purposes, we kind of need a defined target area. And so this is the area that we're looking at. You can see how I-75 intertwined with the Dixie Highway for our purposes of sort of a focus group. Because really, when you look at the entire corridor, this is one of the last stretches of the corridor that still retains a lot of its original look and feel from when it was originally designed. So what the future of this looks like is why we're all here tonight, and to kind of get some ideas going and bringing in Dan's expertise. So, like I said, I work with the Main Street program. Main Street programs typically work with traditional downtown commercial centers, commercial districts. But for our purposes from Oakland County, we're also looking at the corridor here as kind of a very large open air Main Street. When you look at it and applying the Main Street approach, which I won't get into tonight, it's a whole other ball of wax, but basically 4 comprehensive points, spells dope, easy to remember, design, organization, promotion, and economic vitality. It's those 4 things working together that makes historic commercial districts, heritage corridors, downtowns work. They just can't look pretty. They've got to have an economic strategy. They can't have just an economic strategy. They have to have promotion and marketing. And they have to have organizational leadership to kind of keep it all moving forward. And we have 23 Main Street programs in Oakland County today. And that number is probably poised to grow in 2018. Additional objectives that we're looking at tonight, exploring the possibilities of establishing Groveland and Holly Township as gateway communities to recreational and natural amenities, which you're very fortunate to have an abundance of here. Incredible amount. Incorporate principles of responsible tourism, because I think we've all been to tourist locations sometimes. They're like, yeah, this is kind of scary. And they've lost a little bit of control of their communities. But here it's looking at, you have this element of tourism already. You're going to have more that's potentially coming with the ORV park. So how do we balance that with the lifestyle and the feel and look of this area that everyone's been talking about, that they really value, that they want to maintain? So how do we balance the two? So that's an additional objective. So secrets of successful communities, Ed McMahon, who was your speaker last year at the Heritage Conference, right? So Ed McMahon has written about this, and these are the secrets of successful communities. You have to have a vision for the future. You know, the saying, you don't know where you're going if you don't have a plan, that's kind of this. So you have to have a vision for the future, an inventory and build on community assets and resources. And I've worked in this for a long time around the country, and nothing drives me crazy when someone says, well, we can't do that because we don't have this or we don't have X. Every community has resources, every one of them. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the form of money. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of buildings. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the form of the businesses. Sometimes the greatest assets to make great things happen for the communities, I'm looking at it. It's the people. It's the collaboration. It's the partnerships. Those are assets too in which to build on the community beyond just the physical. Use education and incentives, not just regulations. So if we're trying to get people to look at some different options, a way to look at things, it's not just necessarily hitting them over the head with regulation, but also educating, this is why this is potentially a good thing to look at. And here's even some incentives to potentially help you get there. Not just being a voice of no. Pick and choose among development projects. Cooperate with neighbors for mutual benefit. Pay attention to community aesthetics because it's really important. I think we've all been to places that we've all said, gosh, I really like it here. I really like the way this community looks. I like the way it feels. Well, they just didn't fall out of the sky like that. They made decisions, they made choices as a community that got them. They just didn't happen to be like that. And they're still like that today. And you can think of communities even in Oakland County that are in that mode. Meets the needs of both the landowner and the community, and have strong leaders and committed citizens. And in the brief time that I've been in Oakland County, and here in Groveland Township, and setting in on the first public meeting that you've had on your master plan, I've definitely seen that. I think Bob was very surprised too of how many people came to that meeting. We had to keep setting up tables and chairs because the room kept filling up beyond expectations. So there's no questions that we have those ingredients potentially in front of us. And now it's to see how we can put them to good use for the future. So one of the opportunities here is the Dixie Highway. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Marriott, Dr. Dan Marriott. We're talking about his PhD on the way up here. Dan has had a long career in historic preservation and planning. He worked with the National Trust for Historic Preservation as the rural preservation expert. So he knows rural communities, worked with rural communities. He's spent a lot of times with organizations, municipalities, local governments, talking about heritage corridors, historic roads, what makes them work well, what doesn't make some work well, not only with a lot of different locations around the United States, but overseas as well, in Canada, Mexico, the UK. Have I missed anyone there? So, okay. so Dan has a depth of experience. He's going to be here for the next full day and a half. And at the end of the day, or on Wednesday in the morning, for people who can attend, it's going to kind of give a recap of all the conversations that we've had today. So today we've toured a little bit with Oakland Parks. We've met with Bob, folks from Groveland Township. We just kind of did a nickel tour of the corridor. So Dan is already, churning with all kinds of thoughts and observations based on those conversations. So it's really exciting. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Marriott. Thank you.
Let me know if the sound is okay. First of all, thank you for having me here. Secondly, I apologize for being tardy. I feel like I've been here for 3 weeks already. It's a very intense afternoon. And I cleverly decided to update my PowerPoint based on some of the things I heard today. And my assistant back at the hotel decided we did not want to update at all. So John's telling me, you need to come downstairs. I'm like, it's going to crash, it's going to crash. So thank you for being patient because we have a presentation for you now, so I'm very happy to be here with that. Dixie Highway. And I want to thank you all for having me here. The planning department, Brett, thank you very much for having me out, and other communities and resources here in the state that helped to make my trip out here possible. So I do appreciate that very much. The Dixie Highway. I just thought I might take a quick step back in history. Why? Why does it matter? Why is it the Dixie Highway? Michigan to Florida, 1914. And you can see, it's not a typical linear road. It's looping all over the place because this was a road that was built based on tourism and travel and economic development. Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And here we are right here in one little spot of all of that. This is a big deal. It's promoted, it's marketed, there's magazines about it. Who goes to Florida? The Shriners go to Florida, and they drive on the Dixie Highway. So this is the clever town along the way that put a big Campbell up to make the Shriners want to maybe stop and invest in real estate while they were traveling down south. There was even a song about the Dixie Highway as well. So this is a big, big deal. So what you have running, I can see the Dixie Highway sign right outside the window here. What you have running through your communities here is not just an important legacy here in your communities within the state of Michigan, but this is an important part of modern transportation in the 20th century automobile era of the United States. And that's not a very bad spot to be. And Michigan very quickly starts promoting its part of the Dixie Highway. It's largely about getting people to go to Florida, but states along the way start seeing it as a way to promote tourism within their own states as well. Why is this such a big deal? There's a thing called the Good Roads Movement at the end of the 19th century, because in 1900, only 7% of the roads in the United States were improved. And by improved, I don't mean paved, I just mean kind of graded and sort of dry. If they had...
Like now?
America's public highway system was deplorable. And we have first bicycles and then automobile. And there's this big push to build modern public highways. And at this point, there's still no federal investment in public highways. So these road associations that grow up and promote good roads. They put out a magazine. You can see it's a sample of roads possessing real staying qualities. So you could subscribe to the Good Roads Journal, learn about building modern public highways. And Oakland County gets involved very early as well. I found this at the National Transportation Library a few weeks ago. I was doing some other research, and I knew I was coming here. And like, stabilized surfaces in Oakland County, Michigan. So you're part of this whole legacy here in terms of modern public highways. Woodward Avenue is the first concrete road in the United States. And it was rural road, too. It was the idea of expanding the stretch of the automobile out into the landscape. And we take off, and eventually in 1916, the federal government gets involved. States begin establishing state highway departments. And part of what happens with you and the relationship you have here is with the Lincoln Highway, which is the first transcontinental highway in the United States, going from New York City to San Francisco. It's actually really Hoboken to Oakland, but it sounds much better to say San Francisco and New York, because both cities were connected by ferries at the far ends. The Lincoln Highway is the vision of this guy, Carl Fisher, from Indianapolis. He developed the first modern headlight that was reliable and helped establish the Indianapolis Speedway to test motor cars. He had this idea of having a public, toll-free, all-weather road across the country. And this is a huge deal, having a public highway driving across the country. They were really excited when it got to Nevada. And then Fisher has this idea. Fisher's investing, this is a little bit of self-interest. He's investing in the Florida real estate boom. And boy, what if we had a great highway getting people down to the lands that I'm investing in? So this idea of connecting the whole Midwest of the United States to Florida. And that's the origin of the Dixie Highway. And there we are. Or lovely things like this. The early days of automobile are really trapped in a lot of lore about travel, tourism, and heritage. And this is one of my favorite images here. You can see from Sunoco. You see the Native American road, followed by Conestoga, followed by Stagecoach, followed by the modern highway. There's this sense of connectivity to the past. And this is what trail I learned this morning? The Native American Trail. This is Saginaw. So you have the same legacy here of travel. I know this is a post road as well. So you can look at right here with the Dixie Highway, you can see the same layering of history of transportation. These are very, very deep roots. There's also the National Old Trails Highway, which became US 40. This is a project of the Daughters of the American Revolution to connect the old National Road and the Santa Fe Trail, Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles. The old Spanish Trail. Again, these are all pre-federal highway system. The Park-to-Park Highway, which connected all the great national parks. This also indicates what parts of the road are paved, dirt, gravel. Most of it is really pretty rough. This would take weeks to try to get around here. And every highway has its own symbol. We have no numbers yet. And of course, the Dixie Highway is represented by the red and white bands along the, these were usually painted along the poles along the sides of the road. So you would follow these shields as you were driving along. So that's kind of where we are in terms of history. What I want to do now is just kind of share with you some examples of communities around the United States that have been dealing with these types of resources. If you think about it, if you have an historic house, an historic farm, an historic barn, it's fairly easy to kind of like recognize it's historic, take care of it, maybe open it up to visitors, showcase it. But what do you do with a long highway from Michigan to Florida or New York to San Francisco? You can't preserve everything. Yet we also know there's aspects of the travel that give us a sense of the past and the significance of the communities that grew up because of these roads. So I'd like to give you some examples and some ways to think about this as you continue your conversation here with the Dixie Highway in Michigan. So I want you to think about this. Think about a heritage corridor gateway having three basic elements: an arrival point, a gateway corridor, and a destination. So arrival points when you first feel like you've gotten someplace. There's a sense of the landscape changes, there may be a sign. There's some indication of something shifting, changing. It may be very dominant, it may be very imperceptible, but you have a sense of suddenly things are slightly different. You feel like you're in a different place. Now, lots of places put up signs. 26th, that's a small town in America. Who really cares? Makes me wonder what the 25th is. Again, these are gateways. This is my favorite. This is Avon, New York, on New York Route 5. First of all, a gateway should never be a point of negativity. No parking. And then look at all. Can anybody read this? And think about people that are coming to your town to visit. Do they really care about the cross-country championship in 1967? Communities, it's important to showcase what matters locally, but it's also important to recognize that people who might be visiting may not care as much about that as you do, and it may be not the most important thing. And can they really read this with the Lions Club and the Rotary and the Speed and et cetera, on first arrival? It's kind of overwhelming. What type of message? It's a little bit with the light in here. I don't know if you can read that sign. Tree City, USA. I'm sure some of you may be Tree City, USA. Do you see any trees in this picture? Think about what your messaging is. Now, this is an example I thought might be useful in terms of long-distance corridors. This is US Route 1 in Virginia. And when you're on a long-distance highway, how do you distinguish your communities? And how do you also be part of a larger system? And I think that's one of the things you need to figure out here is you have the legacy of Dixie Highway, which ties you intimately all the way down to Florida with all the different states. But also, you're not competing directly with people in Miami in terms of who's going to stay and have dinner in your community tonight either. So how do you buy into the legacy of the Dixie Highway and at the same time distinguish each of your communities as being a special destination within this region or within the state? So, an arrival point, some kind of indication that something's happening, you're someplace new. After that is what I call the gateway corridor. This is what people usually don't think about. It's that distance between the welcome sign and where people are going to. Here's a good example. This is Grand Junction, Colorado. Sign, Tree City, and it's in a rental lot for equipment. It may be the actual physical boundary. If you go a little bit farther down the road, it's kind of nice. Maybe this is a better place to have the sign. That everybody think all that other stuff is in another community. I'll show this. This is a very good example of a gateway corridor. This is going into Annapolis, Maryland's capital. This is right when you get off the interstate. You can see the brick that's used. There's consistent treatment of the materials here. There you see the welcome sign. This is already looking nice. Even if you don't know where you're going, you kind of like it already. So your sign can go lots of places, and it's more than just a sign. You're driving in, there's a sign. Simple message, Annapolis, Maryland's capital. I don't know who won girls swimming in 1944, but it really doesn't matter. It's a clear message for visitors. And it's easily read, too. There's not too much information they're trying to give you. And it's all based on landscape, and the destination, the goal, is the State House at the end of this. This is about a 5-mile-long drive, all very nicely managed. So long before you even get to here, you kind of already like the place. And that, of course, like the capital, is the destination. What you promised. If you're telling people, come to our township, it's rural, you can go camping, you can pick berries, the kids will love it. And when they arrive and drive past the commercial strip and all kinds of clutter, it's like, wait, I was promised this, and where is what we came for? So think about, especially with tourism, why people are coming and what their impressions are when they first arrive. Obviously, this is probably New Mexico, right? It's got all this telltale signs. This is one of the great destination chapels in New Mexico, and this is what happens when you first get there. Don't feel very welcome. Plus, you spend all your time reading this, and they've already ended up closing for the day anyway. Again, what's the first sign? Does it seem like someplace different and special? Or does it seem like I might as well just back at home again? So again, these things all matter, all these places matter, but how they're represented in the landscape, how they define your communities is important to think about. So, a bit more detail. The arrival point, that first sign. Think about, you have an image, you have a sign, you have some form of gateway. After that, there should be a sense of things being different. Brett, I was mentioning to you at lunch, what's the township farthest south?
Springfield?
Springfield?
Yeah. All the way south?
Way south, yeah.
Waterford.
No, farther. Before I got to Oakland County, I think.
West Bloomfield. West Bloomfield on Telegraph Road.
Maybe.
Keep on going, you'll be in Detroit.
Where you said it had the nice entry sign?
Where you said I said sign. When you come up, when I was driving up Telegraph
West
Road,
Bloomfield.
really nice monument sign, like a little pole, nice big ball. And after that sign, utilities were underground. There were flowers in the median. It was a completely different world once I passed that sign. It was very nicely done. This is, anybody driven the Alaska Highway? It's a great trip, isn't it? So you probably stopped here and had a photo taken, maybe?
I think it looks familiar, but I was there.
This is how the Alaska Highway is marketed. I wanted to drive the Alaska Highway all my life. I finally did drive the Alaska Highway. And this was my, I'm going to get there. And I know where it is because there's a big red arrow to tell me how to get there. You see it? That's the sign there. Yeah. That's not Alaska. That's any place USA. That's all the crud I left to go to Alaska. They lured me with that, and I got greeted with that. It was a real disappointment. If you go about 10 miles up the road, you find what you're looking for. But you want your visitor's first experience to be, wow, this is what I came for, we're here, this is really cool. It would be better to just pick that sign up and move it 10 miles up the road. This is on Kauai, the Garden Island in Hawaii. This is an example of a type of gateway to a rural landscape. And if you look down here, it's light, there's a little truss bridge right here. You have a very large state highway. It comes down to this one-lane truss bridge because the island is just about to end. This is a dead-end road. So they don't need a sign here because they have this bridge. It's a physical representation of a change in the landscape. You can see it's being held up with kind of chicken wire and things like that. But it's been beautifully restored now. And it actually works in terms of highway safety as well, because after this, it's all rural small towns. And this effectively changes people's sense of the road. It's a one-lane bridge, and it effectively slows down traffic. And after this, the road is very narrow. So it's a gateway without saying welcome or anything. It's just, it's beautiful, and the landscape changes. This is the Spanish Peaks area in Colorado, which is heavily marketed to Denver as get away from the city, get away from the noise, get away from like being attached to your telephone. And there's a giant cell tower right next to the, maybe not the best spot for this get away from everything sign. Gateways in terms of information centers. This is on Interstate 70 in Maryland. This is the Welcome Center for the western part of the state. It's built in local stone and mimics local architecture. So be thinking about the history of your resources here, architecture, materials, and what helps to really add authenticity to visitor facilities. Here's a very physical gateway. This is in Rochester, New York. Again, clear, simple message. Welcome, Center City, easily get it. This isn't a bad sign either, really. It's quite simple, and it's a nice setting. Simple, clean, good information. Also very simple, but just doesn't seem like they cared quite as much. Welcome to Pawhuska. This is the capital of the Osage Nation in Oklahoma. Welcome to Pawhuska. Welcome to Pawhuska. scary people here. Okay. Should your first message to visitors be, it's not safe? Because that's kind of what I feel like this guy lives down here. Welcome to Pahuska. Welcome to Pahuska. Okay. Lots of communities do this. There's inconsistency of messaging, and you want to be thinking about how things come across. Welcome to Pahuska. I have several more, but in the interest of time, I decided that was enough to give you the point of consistency and clarity of message. So, welcome. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to signs because it's good to know. Visibility. It has to be seen in the landscape and be able to be viewed based on the road or the way that people are approaching your town. Not so good here. Nice, clear message here. Simple, this is a Cape Cod. You're entering Park Service. It's a very clear, simple message. It's conspicuity. How does it stand out in the larger landscape? How do you compete with all these other messages? This is Elko, Nevada. You see the welcome sign? No, of course not. It's right there. Now, I know this is kind of a gray day and an odd shot. The light here isn't ideal, but even if it was bright light, you can tell you can't read this sign. There's a sign there. And even see an arch back here and an arch here. It's almost like it was designed to blend into the JCPenney. It's a really nice little sign, but it has no attention. This gets people's attention. That works. And it stands out within the environment that it's located in. Legibility. This is on Interstate 68 in Maryland. Washington County, Allegheny County. Both signs have the county name. Both signs welcome you. One you can read and one you cannot. So be aware of this. The height of letters changes with speed in terms of visibility and legibility. So the faster you go, but that's a lot better, isn't it? Yes. The faster you go, the bigger the letters need to be. So if you're trying to get people's attention on I-75 or the Dixie Highway or a dirt road, you should be using different sized letters on your welcome signs. Big intersection like down on Telegraph Road where all the commercial stuff is way down, coming up from the airport, which I did this morning. Picture one of those giant intersections with all that stuff, and picture a beautiful planted area. That's right through here. And picture a sign, in reality, that's probably about this big. And picture yourself going 50 miles per hour and trying to read, "Welcome to Bartlesville, landscaping courtesy of the Ladies Garden Club, and sponsored by blah, 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 blah." It might as well be hanging in their family room because you can't read it. So you just have to trust me on that. Okay, this is in Columbia, Maryland. You can read this at high speed. Wow. Okay, so the Gateway Corridor, this idea of movement. So I ended up working with the Osage Nation, and what we looked at, here's a sign. I mean, this is not the greatest sign because this is basically the same sign you use for highway safety, no parking. It's an okay sign. Here's where the sign is right now. Welcome to the Osage Nation. This is what you see. A few more miles down the road, this is what you see. This is the gateway to the Osage Nation. This is an administrative boundary. And there's a big difference between the two. So you can mark the boundary, but you want to welcome people here. I did some sketches about some possible ways to have a monument sign that would really give a sense of arrival. And then the Osage Nations has a very talented graphic designer who started looking at the iconography, welcoming people in the Osage language as well as in English to give a sense of being someplace a little bit different.
How do you keep those clouds in the background? It's Tornado Alley, right?
Actually, it kind of is. I gave a presentation in the basement one time because of that. And this is the landscape that you're traveling through. Every place has a landscape that's very distinctive. And what I liked about the two townships up here is the fact that having driven all the way up from the airport, this is the first spot where I actually got a sense of having what the landscape of Michigan actually looked like. I started seeing trees, topography, water. It's really, really beautiful. The landscape is important. This is Galena, Illinois. I'm sure many of you have been to Galena. It's a nice little getaway. This was one of the pilots for the Main Street program. So Galena, like most Main Streets, did a really great job about figuring out their downtown, revitalizing businesses, restoring historic buildings. And Galena is nestled in a beautiful rolling landscape. But with all the planning, this is my caution to you. Lots of times communities that are just on the edge of development think it'll never ever happen. It does eventually happen. When it happens fast. And Galena went from being hopeless to being Chicago weekend getaway. Let's go antiquing. A B&B. They have special tea in the afternoon. And the whole culture's changed. The economy's shifted. And suddenly all this land around the town, maybe we'll have a second house out there. And a farmer decides to sell his land and subdivide it, and it's going to block the beautiful view across the hills to the spires and towers of Galena down in the valley. And the town's like, you can't block that. And the farmer's like, you're not paying for my land. It's my view. This became a really ugly court case. The farmer stacked up hay bales along the edge of the road. I have an old Kodachrome slide I cannot find. He stacked up hay bales to block the view of the town. If you're not paying for it, you can't have the view. You don't want to get there. The reason I bring this up is, if you're driving home tonight and you go under a canopy of trees, if you go past a body of water, if you go past an open field with wildflowers in it, and you're kind of like, this is why I live here, this is why this is special to me, ask yourself, if tourism takes off, if economic development changes, what's the reality of enjoying that 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road? And if it matters to you, how do you ensure that that's protected, and how can you do that in a way that's fair and equitable? Boulder, Colorado, years ago decided they didn't want to be part of Denver, and they started acquiring land to have a green belt around the city. The first time I went to Boulder, you drive for miles through the open landscape outside of Denver, but now it's all subdivisions all the way out until you hit the Boulder Greenbelt. That was a conscious decision they made based on their sense of their place in the landscape, and that place in the landscape mattered to them. This is where I grew up. Well, I didn't grow up in a plane, but this is Virginia. This is Montgomery County, Maryland. Poor Montgomery County, Maryland has no economic development. You can see all the housing in Virginia. This is actually a protected agricultural district. The county, which is on the edge of Washington, was urbanizing rapidly. And in the 1970s, they said, we've got dairy farms. We would like the western third of the county to be green and agricultural. We don't want the whole county to be paved and developed. They did a program there. I'm not sure how it would work here because you have a different governmental structure here. But it's called transfer of development rights. And I share this with you because you need to figure out the carrot and stick. If someone owns a beautiful piece of property that everybody values, but they may be viewing that property as their retirement income, you can't really say, well, you can't develop this because we all like it. It's not really fair. So how do you protect areas that are valuable to you, and also ensure that people that own the land get a fair return in their contribution to the community as well? What they did here is called transfer of development rights. And this works well because it's a large single jurisdiction under a single county government. So to have this in the western part of the county, they looked at the existing zoning and basically assigned credits. Your farm could be subdivided to 100 lots. And then they said, the areas close to Washington, where we want to have high-density development, we'll let you use those credits for development there. Very simply, you can build a 4-story building here. If you want to build an extra 5 stories on top, you buy credits from the farmers. When the farmers sell all their credits, the farm is considered developed, and it's taxed at an agricultural rate, not based on the rate of the potential of 100 houses on it. So the farmers actually benefited financially from this. The land's protected in perpetuity by easement, and they're taxed at a responsible rate that allows sustainable agriculture. And this now, which was dairy farms when I was kids, is now pick your own, organic. These farmers are really making a lot of money now because of this structure. But it had to be a structure in which they were fairly compensated, and they had to be taxed for agricultural land, not based on developable land. I just share this with you to suggest that if there's things that you want to have protected, you have to figure out a way to protect it. And that varies as you go around the country based on policies. But think about what matters to you, and then figure out the ways to think creatively to protect things that you care about. This is the agricultural district today, which if this hadn't been done, this would be covered with McMansions rolling across the hills. So lastly, your destination. This is kind of a very obvious gateway right in the middle of Golden, a very friendly howdy folks in Colorado. Squatch, this is also in Colorado. Dine, shop, play. This is the only restaurant in town. Most of the town is really kind of boarded up and abandoned right now. Too many people wish, the sign's brand new. It's bad thinking. So many towns you drive through, like, shop, enjoy, and everything's boarded up. This is a really handsome sign. If they just took off dine, shop, play, to be very honest. The sign suggests it's a nice town, that they're thinking forward. They have a good designer. But the reality is you've lured me in on dine, shop, and play, and I can have a sandwich. I suppose I can dance around the bench for my play, and I guess I can shop if I ask to buy a cup of coffee. That's about it. This is the one functioning business, basically. So think about these things. Also think about the idea of a destination in terms of a linear corridor. Sometimes it's the experience of farm stands. This is a little Christmas shop in Oregon along one of their state byways. This idea, if this were in a strip mall, would you stop? This the same shop in a strip mall on a giant sea of asphalt down that way toward Detroit. No one's going to stop there. Well, you put it in a little kind of like log woody building and nestle it back in the pine trees and it's going to be the best Christmas shop ever, right? Because we travel like this. This is not essential shopping. This is, I'm enjoying my time and my experience. And when you get to rural districts, you have those types of opportunities for that type of market. So I'm just going to share with you a few case studies, and we'll wind this all up. This is Rising Sun, Indiana. This is on the Ohio River Scenic Route in Indiana. I love this town because when I first started working here, I was convinced it was absolutely hopeless. They had a big 4x8 piece of plywood that said, "Welcome to Rising Sun," painted by the second grade class. And there was a sun with sunglasses smiling at you. The sign was kind of crooked, and they planted flowers in front of it that nobody ever watered. I realized very quickly if I focused on the sign, we would miss the bigger picture. So I kind of said, "It's beautiful, I like your sign." I went back a few years ago, and this replaced the 4x8 piece of plywood. And it's very consistent throughout the town. This used to be an abandoned main street. This town really took some risks, tried some things differently, and they've done wonderfully well. And this is the big weekend getaway for Cincinnati now. They're close to a metropolitan area. They're close to people who want to just get away. You wake up on Saturday morning and say, "Let's go, spend the night, have a nice experience, go camping, go to a farm, do something outside." And they're the little destination that makes that all work. They greet their visitors. And this is the way into town. Just like Galena, they forgot about how to deal with all of this. You need to have this, but is there a way to do better? Anybody know what this is? You're cheating.
I think.
It is McDonald's. Kind of nice, isn't it? Historic town on Long Island. We're happy to have McDonald's here. Well, the first thing you do is it has to be uniform. You can't expect big corporations to do this and you let local people get away with garbage. So there has to be a sense of equality, which means you have to have some type of design standard. You can do voluntary standards, you can do standards by regulation. I've seen both work. It depends what works best with the community. I've worked with communities that start out with voluntary and then they move forward to. I share this with you. When McDonald's comes in and they said, we want this, what did McDonald's say? We'd love to? No, they said we can't do it. It's impossible. Let me put it to you this way. McDonald's, Burger King, Super 8, Walmart, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They don't ever build some place because they feel sorry for your community. Oh,
Based on demographics.
here's a spot in Michigan that really, wouldn't it be nice if we gave them this nice resource? Let's go, we'll lose money, but it'll be nice if they have it. That's not how it works. They're always going to try to get away with the most minimal investment. If your community has a strong sense of this is who we are, this is what we do, they're initially going to balk. But I promise you, if you stay by your goals and demonstrate that everyone's doing that, they're going to want to be there, and they're going to grudgingly finally come around, and they're going to do it for you. Now, if you ask for a gold leaf in the bathroom, they probably won't do that, but it has to be reasonable. But you can affect very good design out of corporate America. And sometimes it can be very simple, too. This is a very ordinary gas station in the Hudson Valley, New York. But it's set back. It's not paved out to the street. The street trees continue in front. The sign's nicely set back. So this doesn't have to be as grand as the McDonald's example. It can even just be the simple idea of, you can build your standard building, but we want it set back. We want to have the landscape continue on. We want the sidewalks to continue. We want the sign to be a certain size. And this is a nice rural example. I just want to talk a little bit about scale, too, how things are viewed and perceived in the landscape. This is the National Cathedral in Washington. This is where I live. This is my neighborhood. You can see the banners here for the anniversary a few years back. Banner on the pole, banners on the cathedral. The banners on the pole are 18 inches by 45 inches. The banners in the cathedral are 20 feet by 50 feet high. This is a 5-story building. It looks the right size. So notice when you're traveling around, sometimes you just don't notice things. So be sure things are the right size. I worked on an interpretive panel program in Indiana to talk about the history of the old National Road. Just like the Dixie Highway, it's a very rich story. And we designed a series of interpretive panels up and down the road. And there's a huge argument about what was the right size for the panels. So we made a big foam core mock-up, and we carted it around the state. Everyone was convinced this was going to be too large when they looked at it inside. When we got it outside, they realized maybe it should be a little bit larger. Mm-hmm. So be sure that you test those types of things with your communities. If you're wondering if a building is going to be too tall or whatever, go to the Hallmark Star, get some helium balloons, tie a thread, run them up, and you can see how tall something's going to be. And here we see the signs today installed along the historic corridor. This talks about the history of the road, why people traveled the road, how it impacted Indiana's communities. So again, this is a part of a 6-state historic road corridor, just like you're part of a multi-state corridor. But this is all about the road in Indiana and how it changed Indiana by its presence.
Did those communities, though, have the ability to say that a section of their community, a piece of the road or whatever, is going to be considered a heritage route? And in order to have a building approved in that section, any new or remodeled construction had to comply with a set of standards that help perpetuate the theme that we're looking for.
It varied. Some towns did that, some towns did not. This becomes tricky when you're dealing with a long-distance historic road, like the Dixie Highway. You can't expect everyone everywhere to buy into it. So the signs provide consistent information as you move across the state. And some towns really bought into it and added on design guidance. They established historic districts. Other towns chose not to. The whole corridor is marked. And I think what happens in a case like this is the towns that go that extra leg, put that extra effort in, guess which towns are really thriving now with economic development and things like that?
Is it a
Some
zoning
communities-
district, or is it a set of criteria? Is it an area, or both that makes it work?
You can do both. A number of communities in the United States have what they call as overlay zones. So you have the basic zoning of an area, but then you have a linear corridor. The city of Rochester, New York has overlay zones for their gateway routes. So there's an extra level of scrutiny,
They have a what? I'm sorry.
an extra level of scrutiny within these overlay corridors. So the zoning doesn't change, but the expectation of the building, the development within that corridor is ratcheted up one notch. So it's called an overlay zone. There's lots of ways, there's many, many ways to do this. And I don't like to say too much because I don't know your local policies, and the guys at the county I know can really, the staff of the county can really help you with that. There's ways to solve this. The question is if you want to do this to figure out the way through it. What I typically would suggest in a place like this is you have some really nice historic resources here, and nice historic structures, historic landscapes. Look at those as one aspect, that we want to try to restore things back. You know, that great barn that's right here. You know, things like that are really great, iconic things that give a sense of the heritage of the place. For new development, don't try to get too cute. Don't have like fake barns coming up as gas stations, but just have fairly simple things. You know, cut down on the signage, cut down on the color bars at the gas stations and things like that. Actually, I'll show you an example in a minute about that might help further this conversation. Let's skip that. Also, we had this conversation this afternoon just with all the different park units and resources you have here. This is in the Columbia River Gorge in Oregon, and there's so many different land management agencies. There's this almost like too much clutter with, you know, our sign, our sign, our sign, our sign. So they developed a consistent sign for all the different park units. And you can see, this is the U.S. Forest Service here. This is Oregon State Parks. So each agency has their identifier, their shield, but they share a common signage, which makes the whole region seem a bit grander. Because when the signs are all different, you don't get the sense of like, this is all parkland. And it really reinforces that we have consistency. Just the idea of scale and all that. Lighting, I'll skip over some of this. Be careful with lighting, especially in a rural area. Don't fall prey to overly decorative, Victorian, Disneyland decorative lights. Sometimes simple and cheaper is much better, because in a district like this, it's really about the landscape. I don't want to see decorative lights when I'm driving along the roads here. I want to see lights that provide illumination and disappear into the landscape very nicely. They're cheaper, they're better, and they're reinforcing the idea of a more rural character. When you get into Main Street districts, that's when you think about a different, more ornamental function. Think about proportions. You know, this is ridiculous. This is very nicely scaled. I hope you think that's ridiculous. I want to snap it in half. This is a very nice light in Sarah, Oklahoma, Dewey, Oklahoma. It's nicely balanced, it's nicely weighted. Skip that. This is Wendover Will in West Wendover, Nevada. It's a great iconic sign, and they just put in these sort of like urban Victorian decorative lights. This is the Wild West. So think about your messaging. These are no parking signs in Vermont. Sign clutter versus sign organization. Identifying historic districts. And they paint the backs of the signs so they disappear into the landscape. Using land trust and conservation easements is another way to protect things that you value. So look at your resources here in the state to protect some of the landscapes and views that you have. I like this sign a lot because it talks about this community in Colorado actually taking this investment and protecting this landscape. And then look at that. That's just sloppy. So be conscious of some of these details. Also, as a result of today, looking at all the different units around here, with budgets and changes right now, with natural resources, visitor resources, whenever you can partner, it works really well. This is the New Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Visitor Center in Maryland. It's on a very small parcel that was a fragment of a state park, but they really want the visitor center to express her trudging through the landscape as she took people to the north for freedom. So this is located right next to, it's the Blackwater Wildlife Refuge, which is one of the oldest wildlife refuges in the United States. So they deliberately pushed the visitor center complex right up against the large, already existing public land to give a sense of the landscape that she would have interacted with. This is the journey through hallowed ground I was mentioning to some of the staff here at the county that might be good for you to look at as well. This is US 15 corridor, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. All different jurisdictions, different planning models, trying to come up with a consistent theme. And what they did was they went out and they inventoried their whole road. Where are the views? Where are the open areas? Historic sites, commercial strips and things that are less attractive. And they got it all down on a map. Not every bit of this multi-mile thing is beautiful, but there's enough consistency there. And they're working for it with better planning going forward. And lastly, just the idea of these long routes and corridors. Route 1 from Florida all the way up to Maine. I love this. US Route 1 begins here in Key West. From Maine to here, this is the mile zero. People like this kind of stuff, and the Dixie Highway is one of those resources that people will travel. And as I showed earlier, a group of communities in Virginia really helped to identify and call their claim to their part of historic Route 1. Route 1 up in Maine at the other end. Anybody know what this is? Don't say anything, John. This is you're probably guessing now. Now, I don't think you should build a colonial McDonald's here, but what I would suggest is work with corporate America. If you have historic resources, have them work with it. If you have an important landscape, have them not be so shouting at you in terms of their presence. And there's the nice little sign. This is down the road in Kennebunk, Maine, where the main highway, this is US 1, goes through the town. Heavily planted, nice pedestrian access, nice sign ordinance. These towns used to be really down and out and forgotten and really economically marginal. And they've all come back because they all took a chance on saying, you know, we deserve better. And we can ask for better, and we're surprised we got better. And now because of that, they expect better. And here's another example right here. See down there, the Sunoco station. This is a nice example. This is a standard Sunoco station, but they don't have all the giant illuminated stripes. Small sign, canopy. If you want to sell gas, that's our price for selling gas. And Sunoco said that's fine, because they make a lot of money there. I'm just going to share with you a couple closing images of things that I think work really, really well. This is Loch Lomond National Park in Scotland. If you think about Scotland, you think about the landscape. I mean, look at this sign. It just kind of says, you know, just seeing that sign gives you a sense of what you're going to experience. South Norwalk, Connecticut, industrial, gritty, lots of traffic, big letters under the rusty railroad bridge, and it looks really good because it works for that place. And sometimes these things can be very simple, iconic, memorable. There's some really great old neon along this corridor. I love the bowling and the cocktail glass. And remember, too, sometimes your road is the destination. People are coming for the Dixie Highway. Beautiful stretch of highway through here. I'm looking at why I'm talking to you all evening. So I'm going to say thank you with that. I apologize for my tardiness, the meltdowns with the slides and everything, but I hope this gave you some ways to think about the Dixie Highway, your townships here, and where you can go forward with some thoughts and ideas, and how you can spin all this. Figure out what you want, what matters to you, then work with the county, work with your local offices, and figure out how to bring this about. But set your expectations very high. That's the best place to start. Then you can work in the budget and everything as you go forward from there. But if you don't ask for what you want, you're not going to get it. And that's my closing message to you. So thank you for having me, and thank you to the county for having me, and all the communities that sponsor me as well.